Violence and video games go together like peanut butter and jelly. They've been intertwined since the beginning. Parents, politicians, the media all fight a crusade against violent video games with the intent to protect children. This movement's typically mocked, but have things changed in 2024? Now that graphics have caught up to our imagination, have we crossed a line? Are video games today too violent? A question that's been hyped up for so long. In the past, the argument didn't hold water. Just look at games from the 80s and early 90s. Sure, there's dirty little gems like Custard's Revenge, but any sort of violent act were just colored pixels on a screen. Any concrete impression of violence would take incredible amounts of imagination to conceive. And honestly, it was typically hilarious. Intestines that looked like worms, Sprite blood splattering the walls. Even the most grotesque attempts couldn't shake this playful cartoony feel, even as graphics evolved with systems like the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. But as the graphics grew more advanced, so did the opposition. And then, a game changer. Mortal Kombat arcade cabinets burst onto the scene in 1995, and things really come to a head with its spine-tingling fatalities. While tame by today's standards, fatalities stirred controversy immediately. The backlash against Mortal Kombat was so great that it helped create the ESRB. Because the history of violent video games and Mortal Kombat are so mired together, let's use fatalities as a gauge to measure violence in video games. Taking a look at the first 3 games, you can really see what I was talking about earlier. Yes, fatalities do depict violent ideas, but the execution is on par with plastic Halloween decorations. Sub-Zero ripping someone's spine out, Katana's explosive kisses. So silly, thanks to the graphics and dramatic screams. Look at them just standing there staring straight on with their arms ripped off. Hilarious. It doesn't matter what sick idea Ed Boon had, the graphics will always make them look ridiculous. And it definitely makes sense that people were shocked by what they were seeing in 1995. But the reality is, you can only do so much in the 16-bit era. All the decapitations and impalings are imaginative and gory, but also silly and crude. And for anyone who might think that all violence is bad no matter what, at this point, there are too many well-adjusted people living normal adult lives who played games like this when they were younger. So really. And the silly crudeness only gets exasperated on the N64 and Dreamcast, which, to be fair, was an awkward era for everyone. But the point remains, anything with this few polygons shouldn't qualify for an M rating. But then, a catalyst. No longer was blood splatter just flying PNGs. Instead of looking like carved slabs of gyro meat, arms and legs actually looked like arms and legs. And more intricate animation gave way to more nuanced movement. Those Halloween skeletons of yesteryear have been put away indefinitely. Was the violence of Mortal Kombat too great now that it stopped looking like 2 trapezoids fighting to the death? Not yet, but close. While Deadly Alliance, Deception, and Armageddon pushed boundaries like never before, they were still restrained by a very real limitation, which is what made the early to mid 2000s so interesting for Mortal Kombat. Despite the obvious improvements, these games maintain a distinct cartoonish look thanks to the bright colors and over-the-top character designs, meaning the barrier between real and fake was still very apparent. And personally, this is a very memorable period of Mortal Kombat. It's that peak moment where silliness crossed awesomeness. How do you top Quan Chi's head stretch? You don't. Then, 2011's Mortal Kombat and 10 came and really ramped things up, but they didn't cross the line just yet. Not like 11 or Mortal Kombat 1, which takes brutality to a whole other level. Just the detail these games achieve is mind-blowing. Sure, 2011's Mortal Kombat and 10 were violent, but they lack this sense of realness. It's close, but characters have this smoothness to them that make them seem fake. And then there are other small details like wonky hair physics that seem unnatural. But 11 and 1 don't have these issues. In fact, the violence of 11 and 1 go well beyond blood and gore. It's capturing the pain in the eyes of whoever Raiden shocks to death, or the fear when Mei Ling phases into a person's body. Just the depravity of Johnny taking a selfie with a smashed-in head is insane. Whatever messed up thing NetherRealm Studios can imagine, is now possible. And while I do think these fatalities are really cool, creative, and show off a high level of technical skill, there's no doubt that children shouldn't be watching them. Which is strange, I never thought I'd be on this side of the fence. For a 10-year-old, I think I'd be okay with them playing a Mortal Kombat game all the way up from the original to like Deception or Armageddon. But Mortal Kombat 1? Absolutely not. And I want to clarify what I'm for and against. I don't care about general shooters like Fortnite and Apex Legends. There's nothing wrong with shooting someone in video games. I also don't see a problem with games like Grand Theft Auto. Games like Grand Theft Auto are famous more for the idea of violence and mayhem it promotes, but the actual violence in the game is pretty tame. Well, almost. So it's not really violence in general I'm against. Violence is everywhere. TV shows, movies, real life, video games, and it wasn't until now that video games were able to emulate violence and gore to such an extreme detail. And it's that detailed violence I'm concerned with, which really only targets a small percentage of games like contemporary Mortal Kombat. The key issue with this high level of detail is that fatalities today leave almost nothing to the imagination. Intestines look like intestines. A crushed skull looks like a crushed skull.
The snozberries taste like snozberries.
Get out of here! Although Willy Wonka would make a good fighter. Come with me, and I'll beat you into a world of pure imagination. Mortal Kombat always embraced violence. Just back on the Super Nintendo and N64, you had to use your mind to fill in the blanks, since the fatalities were, in a sense, so basic. Even the humor surrounding violence in video games has changed, all thanks to the detailed graphics. In the past, video game violence was funny for how it was shown. Bright red blood splatter, copy and pasted body parts, bones ripped right out of the Sunday funny papers. It was all camp. You couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculous sprites and polygons. But now, the humor stems from what we see. It's the extreme acts themselves, like Kenshi telepathically slicing his opponent to pieces. One's funny because hardware limitations force compromises that yielded funny results. The other pushes the grotesque to over-the-top levels in hopes to induce shock humor. It's the difference between itchy and scratchy and a snuff film. Plus, games like Mortal Kombat want to be controversial. They can't just have Kano ripping out someone's heart out of their chest anymore. No! We need a close-up of Sub-Zero bashing his enemy against an ice wall. Scorpion's spear needs to go through someone's eyes. Mortal Kombat and similar games are just gonna keep pushing their imagination as far as technology will take them. And things are starting to look horrifically real. The spirit of violence has always existed in video games. Game designers are always thinking of new ways to shock players, just letting their dark and sick imaginations run wild. The only difference is that now, with the right team, that vision can come to fruition no matter how gruesome. They're no longer bound by any cage. Now, I'm not saying games like Mortal Kombat should be banned. Adults can do whatever they want. This conversation is centered around children and parents' legitimate fears about protecting them. 20 years ago, yeah, those people were a little crazy. But just as video games have grown more complex, so has this issue. And I don't think exposing kids to Mortal Kombat will create a bunch of little serial killers. That's the same hyperbolic story that's been told since the dawn of gaming. But it's impossible to ignore how advanced graphics have become. So images might be a little scary for kids and younger gamers. I don't fault any parent who doesn't want their kids playing anything too violent. I personally think 8-year-olds can handle a lot, even sniping the heads off the helpless citizens of Vice City. But thanks to NetherRealm Studios, a clear line has been drawn. So if you're playing games around your niece, nephew, young cousin, whatever, be mindful of what they're seeing.